Welcome to this week's Safer Than Your Average. On the show this week we have Kayla. Kayla, if you just want to come in and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Kayla Bergeron. I was in the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001.
Thank you, Kayla.
You're welcome.
Now, if we just go back to your early life, Kayla, where did you grow up? Can you tell us a bit about your background?
I grew up, I was raised in Louisiana, right outside of New Orleans. And my dad was in the pharmaceutical industry. And so we moved from Louisiana, where I spent 14 years, to Missouri, where I went to high school and to college. And after that, I got the political bug to get involved in campaigns. And we moved to New Jersey. And I worked for the governor of New Jersey, Christy Whitman, and worked at the Port Authority as the chief of public and government affairs, which is where I was on September 11th.
Okay.
Is that enough information?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So if we continue on then, can you tell us a little bit about what your job entailed at the Port Authority?
Sure. My job was to deal with the news media and external stakeholders, whether business or community groups, to keep the public informed of what was happening at the Port Authority.
Okay. Okay. And where did you live while you were doing that? Were you in New Jersey or did you live in Manhattan?
I lived in Manhattan at the time.
Okay. Okay. And were you close to the World Trade Center or were you a bit?
I lived on 9th between 1st and 2nd, so I was on the other side of town. Okay.
Okay. So can you tell us a bit about the day leading up to 9/11 before you went to work? Can you tell us a bit about your morning routine, what was happening?
Sure. On September 11th, 2001, it was election day. And it was a primary election, so went to the polling booth. Who did I see? Mayor Giuliani. And then candidate Michael Bloomberg. So I voted, went to work. It was a beautiful day. That blue is etched in my mind forever. So I go to work, and I'm on the 68th floor in the North Tower, and I'm preparing for a meeting. I'm at my desk, and all of a sudden, the building lunges forward about 10 feet. And then it comes back. And I didn't know exactly what had happened. And I looked outside. I had a nice view of the Statue of Liberty, but all of a sudden it looked like somebody was emptying out papers from above me. So I still hadn't put together what had happened. I thought perhaps a small plane had veered off path. And somebody from emergency management called and told me that's what they thought it was. And I remember trying to reach my boss, Neil Levin, who was the executive director of the Port Authority. I wasn't able to reach him, and texted him. And by the way, he's the guy who insisted that we all have Blackberries, including the head of the police department, which was very new. What was a lifesaver for me and many others on September 11th, having that technology. And so I wasn't able to reach him, so I called the governor of New Jersey offices and the governor of New York office. I said, we think a small plane has veered off the path. And I'm sending staff to what was in the Marriott to set up a command center, which is what they did following the attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. So I'm texting senior staff saying, go to the Marriott. And my other staff, we had staggered times a day for reporting, because we were on call 24/7. And so I texted staff saying, we're we're probably going to set up at the Marriott. And a staffer who worked for me was in New Jersey. He was on Coast Guard duty.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Do you need me?" "No, I don't need you." Of course, still thinking that that's a small plane. And then a guy from security came up and said, "It's time to evacuate the building."
Mm-hmm.
I said, "No problem. Let me go turn off my computer." So I turn off my computer, you know, get my briefcase and everything, and I walked the floor to make sure there was no one else left.
Mm-hmm.
And I had sent some people right after the tower had been struck. I sent people to the Marriott. I said, "We need to drop phone lines, pencil, paper, bring our business continuity of operations plan." And so when I entered the stairwell of the 68th floor, I'm texting them on the BlackBerry saying, "Okay, where are you? Is everything set up?"
Mm-hmm.
And there were only 10 flights of stairs below me,
Mm-hmm.
which was a little bit concerning. So we're evacuating. It's very orderly because after the 1993 bombing,
Mm-hmm.
there was extensive drills done.
Mm-hmm.
And there was glow-in-the-dark tape. And so it was very orderly. As we're going down and you have emergency personnel going up with the big tanks,
Mm-hmm.
we would just stand to the side as they moved up and down. And finally, I get to the 6th floor. And by this time, a friend had sent me an Associated Press story that said that with terrorist attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I see somebody from the aviation department. I said, "I'm going to show you something, but don't react."
Mm-hmm.
So I showed her about the AP story. We looked at each other. Well, we said, "Let's get this line moving." And so we're going down, and we felt it was like an airliner or a train rumbled, and we were thrown. The building had turned and twisted,
Mm-hmm.
and we knew that the South Tower had come down.
Mm-hmm.
And the lights were out, the water from the chiller from the air conditioner.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking a little grave. And then out of nowhere pops a Port Authority police officer that turns out to be Sergeant David Lim.
Mm-hmm.
Since the building had twisted, we were blocked from going down. So when we heard his voice, he said, "Come up."
Uh-huh.
I don't know about you, but the last thing we wanted to do was go up in a building that was burning.
Yeah.
But with no other options, we went up. And because the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey had built the buildings and had managed the buildings,
Mm-hmm.
our security, including Port Authority police officers, knew the building inside out. And so he led us through a maze. And he brought us to stairwell B.
Mm-hmm.
And the current from the water was flowing so fast
Mm-hmm.
that they would only let one person go at a time.
Okay.
Through these doors in the hopes of getting down to ground level. And they asked us to take off our belts and and hold on to the person in front of us, which we did. I had I had a pair of pumps on, but some of the women had taken off their shoes, and everything is pulverized. But so there's glass everywhere, so people's feet are getting cut up. And so finally, I think we're at ground level. I see the white, and we kind of lost the people, a few people ahead of us. And we're in this room. It looked like snow had fallen everywhere. And the people I was with were starting to panic. I said, don't scream, because there's stuff coming, debris from above. I said, well, let's look for footprints. We looked for footprints, no footprints. So I said, now's the time to scream. And after screaming for a few minutes, they had heard us. Someone with a bullhorn said, if you can hear my voice, and then a flashlight, then follow the light. And so we did. And after we got out of the building, it looked like bombed out Beirut. And as we're walking through all of this debris, there's stuff falling down, and my shoe gets caught. So someone helps me to get my shoe back. And then we walk around the overhang of the building. And then we were on plaza level, but we weren't on ground level. And so there was a staircase that we found, and walked down the staircase, which by the way is now known as the survivor staircase. And we're on ground floor, take a deep breath, and all of a sudden a police officer says to run. And after being in the stairwell for 45 minutes, it took a lot out, to walk that many flights of stairs. But then I turned, and then I saw the building imploding. It was a cloud of black. It was like a Lethal Weapon movie. And so I ran 16 blocks in my pump, in my suit, and my skirt. And when that cloud of black debris came down, I just dove under a car. And to see the street the other day with the was it Lebanon in the news the other day?
Yeah, the big explosion.
Yes. When I didn't watch a lot of that because of the time of year. But yes, I saw the parallels of paper and debris everywhere. And what had been black coming down, it now turned into white dust cloud everywhere. And so when I got up from under the car, there were a couple of my staffers who were there, and we were just looking for bottles of water to clean our faces so we wouldn't be inhaling that stuff. So at the base of the Holland Tunnel, I waved down our Port Authority police officers who we managed the Lincoln Tunnel. And so I texted all my staff saying, we're going to our police headquarters, which were in Jersey City, just on the other side of New York. So we get to our headquarters, and I'm asking, where is Fred Marone, the head of the police? Where's, I asked the ranking commanders, who's this, and there was silence. And our chief operating officer who survived the roof of the Marriott coming down on him, he said, we're going to be moving to other Port Authority headquarters in Jersey City that's not so close to the tunnel, because at the time, no one knew if there would be more attacks.
Yeah.
And so we moved there, got my staff there, and the CEO says, I need your help. Human resources people on here, we need to find out who's dead and who's alive. So what we decided to do, since in my department was marketing and communications as well as government affairs, we set up a white Port Authority page. And we asked the news media to help us, and they were very helpful. We figured the most discreet way to say it, given the sensitivity of the time, is for Port Authority employees, you need to know where to report, call this number. That went into an Excel spreadsheet. For Port Authority family members who've not heard from their loved ones, call this number. And so I had, as other staff came in, I gave them that job, but you know, when somebody would call and report in, it became a clapping moment. You know, we still hadn't really comprehended the magnitude of what had happened. And thankfully, I went into my work mode. And so I did that. I called both governor's offices. I said, we need public information officers for the next 3 or 4 months, at least, because we're going to be answering phone calls around the clock. And in the early hours, I'm still waiting to see, where's my boss, Neil Levin, the executive director of the Port Authority? Where's the leadership of the police? There was silence. And I remember executive director's wife had come to me asking me for a photo of her husband, because at the time, there was hope that people who were involved, maybe first responders had helped them to a local hospital. So all these headshots were all over Manhattan, on the buses, on the trains. And I told her I didn't have a photo because the building had gone down. And so I next met with the chief lawyer for the Port Authority. What will we tell the world, especially given the jurisdictions of, say, the Federal Joint Terrorism Task Force, FEMA? So we basically came up with a narrow statement that talked about the status of the Port Authority facilities. And we were sure to talk about the terrorist attacks, plural, because the implications, we had just, in June, had just signed a net lease with Silverstein Properties for them to take over management. And so day one, we got the lingo down. And the other thing we did was just talk about the status of Port Authority facilities, which also ran Newark Airport, JFK Airport, and Newark. And so all those facilities are closed. And basically, the Port Authority, given that it's the largest transportation facility in the country, we didn't wait for the federal government to tell us to shut down. And so I remember finally getting to a phone about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. Although my RIM pager worked, the cell phones didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when I came out of the building in the ground level and got my wits about me, I'd sent my parents a note saying, if you get this, I'm out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
But so much time elapsed, they didn't know whether or not I was out of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So I called them. I called my nieces, which was very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
They were in school and obviously they worried. It was a blessing to speak to them, to put the things that might have gone through their head and worry, to allay their fears was important. And it was also my other niece who lived in Boston. It was her birthday. She was 3 years old. Anyway, those are sideboards. So basically for the next 5 or 6 months, we worked around the clock. You went from rescue to recovery to funerals, 72 funerals of Port Authority staff, and then 9/11 commission, then the rebuilding. Should we rebuild the towers? Don't rebuild the towers. We had to develop a public consensus on that. Then we had the issue of whether or not to release the transcripts of the radios and the repeaters in the North Tower. And we didn't want to release those tapes because some of those calls were the last contact individuals had with their loved ones. Yeah. We ultimately had to release them, but we released them to the families first. Mm-hmm. So I don't even remember seeing a counselor for months. Work mode. And, we developed a public consensus on what should be built there. It's a beautiful, if you haven't been there and you go to New York, you got to go see it. They did a fabulous job.
Yeah, I've been to see it here. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful memorial to all the people that lost their life that day.
Yeah, so we kind of work with them too, because the staircase that I referred to, 30 tons of concrete, yeah. They are now in the memorial.
Yeah. And there's quite a famous photograph of you on the staircase as well, isn't there, that was used in the media for a while after 9/11. I stood in the museum, in the 9/11 Memorial Museum with my wife and looked at it and just thought, I couldn't even begin to imagine what happened that day. So I don't know how you had the strength to go into work mode and continue on and do all of the things that you had to do for all of those months after it and get through it and come out the other end.
It was a distraction, and there was comfort and strength in working with people who had been through it. There was a knowingness that to this day gives me strength. Mm-hmm.
So after the recovery and they started to build the new building, there was quite a long period of recovery as well, that they were still removing some of the debris field for quite a long time after it, and Lower Manhattan became quite a large construction area that they started to remove it all and then build the memorial. What did you do after that? Did you continue on working for the Port Authority?
In 2006, I was offered a job in Florida working for the lead agency restoring America's Everglades. Mm-hmm. And so I'm originally from the South, and I was open to the idea of a warmer climate, no snow,
Mm-hmm.
I was there 2006 to 2011. Wonderful job. I loved it. But a new governor came in and he gutted the agency. So I was a casualty of that. And that's when I started to feel something physically wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know what it was. I wasn't a first responder. I wasn't a victim of domestic violence, so it never occurred to me that it was PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was laid off, at the same time, my mother, who was in Georgia, she was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's between the physical aspects of PTSD and my mother getting sick. I think that's when I started to use alcohol
Mm-hmm.
as a form of relief.
Yeah.
So I had a DUI there. And after my mother died, I moved here in 2018. I got a second DUI.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I got the PTSD diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very grateful that a local county program for dual diagnosis saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's rising from the ashes. I'm not sure why me. Why not others? But I'm one of the lucky ones.
Yeah, yeah. I get that, Kayla. I get that. And struggling with that and then using the alcohol to try and numb things out a little bit. I don't even know what to say to you at this point, Kayla. It's such a hard thing to go through. And I know that you'll give hope to a lot of people out there that are struggling themselves by sharing that story. Can you tell us a little bit about your life now, Kayla? What do you do now?
I work for a place called the Connection Forsyth. That's in Northwest Georgia. Mm-hmm. It's a recovery community organization. So if you're having problems with drugs or alcohol, mm-hmm. If you've been released from jail and have no resources, if you're in an accountability court program like I am, this organization connects you with help, whether or not you need recovery meetings, if you need a sponsor, if you need to help build a support network, if you need housing and jobs. We try to find ways to help people. And so that's sort of a metaphor for my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you, and that's such noble work as well. And do you feel like the work that you're doing now, helping people, is a bit of a legacy from what you experienced to be able to move on from it? You're now helping others and using your life to help others in such a positive way and having such a good impact on people.
I don't know if it's a legacy, but through the court program, mm-hmm. I found my calling again. I went into public service years ago, and because of the 2 DUIs, I thought my life was over. Mm-hmm. I didn't think anybody would hire me, especially someone on the front lines dealing with the news media. Mm-hmm. And so the universe conspired, and I couldn't have dreamed I would be in this field now, but exactly what you just said. That's my passion now, is to help people. And I got that from my mother, and that's what I started on that career path. But I kind of fell off that path, and now I've found my purpose. So yeah, that's what I live for now.
And since moving to Florida and then to Georgia, where you are at the moment, have you ever returned to New York?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I'm not in New York. I've been to several. I was there at the opening of the museum, but I went back for several years. But now, the accountability court is part of my family, mm-hmm. and so for the past few years, I host a conference call with many of my former colleagues, as well as the people I've met over the last year who saw the New York Times story. And so my family is my family is growing, and it's not a downer at all. It's just talk about, there was so much focus on the work and such a great group of people to work with. That's what we talk about now, because, and I worry about some people being left behind without any kind of support, not even realizing they have a problem. Mm-hmm. But just reconnecting for the anniversary helps to make us whole and to remind us how far we've come. Maybe all of our journeys may not look the same, but we did this.
Yeah, yeah. And on the anniversary, Kayla, I'll be thinking of you at your desk and going back to switch your computer off and then getting out of there. And my thoughts will be with you that day and everybody else that survived and all of the victims. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Kayla.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing your story.
This podcast is sponsored by Inside Out Group, the specialists in high-risk and challenging filming and time-lapse, covering health and safety videos for rail, construction, and infrastructure projects nationwide.